Welcome back everybody. This time I'm going to talk about CAN2RPM. Simple little board, ultimately going to be used in the Mark 1s, the Mark 2s and the likes where people have fitted VR6s and they want to get that 4-cylinder tack to work. Those VR6 ECUs, some of them don't even have an RPM output, but for the ones that do, the scaling won't be correct. So if you were to run at 3000 RPM, it will not display 3000 on the tack. So the only way to get it to work is to use the CAN output. We can capture that CAN data and we can parse it, process it, and then we can turn it into a usable output that the original tack can use. So you can see here, you've got 3 connections at the top. You've got coil, ground and power, and then you've got your 2 CAN connections at the bottom. When you first hook it up, this one here, the blue light is flashing. That means that there's an error on the board, and that error is because there is no CAN currently connected to this. If I was to hook up an ECU and was to plug in CAN, this LED will stop flashing. But I don't need it for demonstrating because I can do it all on my phone because we've got Wi-Fi enabled. Everything that I make is all on GitHub, so you can go onto GitHub, you can download the code, you can download the enclosure, you can build your own if you want. There's not really much to it. As I said, you've got the 3 connections at the top. You've got coil, ground and power. That is the original coil pulse that would go back to the cluster. You've got chassis ground and you've got ignition power. And then you've got CAN high and CAN low. We talked about the lights. It will flash if there's an error, so typically that's because the CAN bus isn't connected or it doesn't see CAN bus, or you've got the CAN bus wired up back to front. Once you power it up, you will be able to connect to Wi-Fi if you decide within the first 30 seconds after boot. This is just to minimise the current draw, so it will turn the Wi-Fi back off, just so that we're not burning power for something to do. But if you're to connect to it, you can then search for this address on your browser, and you'll be able to go in and change the settings. There's not really much to do. The scaling's already correct for the Mark 1 and the Mark 2, so the only real thing you would really turn on is needle sweep. There is also a CAN termination resistor, so all CAN networks should have them. It's a 120 ohm resistor. What you might find if you've got other CAN products connected onto the network, you can just remove this jumper here and you don't need it. But if you don't have any other CAN devices on the network, you will want to keep this termination resistor in place, so leave this jumper connected. Like everything, this is all based on Volkswagen stuff because I've been eating and breathing Volkswagen since I was a boy. But if you're to download the source code, it is looking for the ECU address 0x280. That is the standard ME7 ECU address, and that is the CAN address that contains RPM. So you can see here, if we get a CAN frame coming in and it's got that address, we will process that RPM and we will send it out to the cluster. If you decide to fit an aftermarket ECU, you can add it in here, and you'll need to know the bytes that it's brought in on and any correction factors at the back of it. So feel free to add that in, just push it onto the GitHub, that would be very appreciated. So we've connected within the first 30 seconds on Wi-Fi. You can see here if I press test needle sweep, we can test needle sweep, and it's scaled correctly. It goes all the way around to 7K and then it comes back down to 0. If I'm wanting to set an RPM just to make sure that the cluster is working, I can do a fixed RPM. So that should be 6.9, that should be 2.5. Just to make sure that you've wired it up and it's correct. If you scroll down in the Wi-Fi, you can't see it here, but it says here that the CAN isn't connected, and it will also show you the incoming CAN RPM. But that's pretty much it. There's not much to it, only a handful of connections to make. This is perfect for conversions where you fitted a VR6 into a Mark 1 or a Mark 2. It would also work on other brands of cars if you needed a traditional ignition coil style output and you only had an ECU or an aftermarket ECU that had CAN bus functionality. So you can go in and you can add whatever you need to be able to parse that correctly.